So the key part, I did this in my theory of pain. Pain from when you have a cut in your finger to when you feel pain in your brain. Human beings have tried to explain that since mankind has been on Earth for 300,000 years. And there have been different theories from Plato in 400 BC to Descartes in 1644 to Melzack and Wall in 1965. And none of their theories withstood the test of time. So I came to explain that with my theory of inflammation and the inflammatory response in 2002. And I also predicted the inflammatory chemical that will be responsible for migraine. And 17 years later, the first drugs to treat migraine, blocking that chemical called CGRP, were approved by the FDA. So I applied the same technique to sickle cell. And what was just interesting was that the initial aspect of the crisis is reversible with reoxygenation. First of all, the history of sickle cell. Sickle cell was first identified in 1910 by Herrick. And then in 1927, Anna Gillespie suggested that hypoxia or a low oxygen environment caused the sickling of red blood cells. And 3 years later, Spriver and Wow in Canada reported that the number of sickle cells in the blood may be varied by the change of the partial oxygen pressure, and that this was a reversible reaction. And that was the whole key to the discovery, that the initial phase of sickling is reversible with reoxygenation. And then other researchers followed. In 1983, Frank and Chu stated that the oxygenated reversible sickle cells had the ability to get back to their normal shape upon reoxygenation.
Right.
Again, 1991, Robert Hedl said that the damage to the cell membrane was initially reversible with reoxygenation. So all these researchers had put this in the literature. Even in 2015, Melanie Gonick in MIT published a video, it's on YouTube, it's called In Predicting Behavior of Sickle Cells. And this was being used to analyze the development of anti-sickling drugs like anti-urea, like
Right.
hydroxyurea.
Okay, Dr. Omoigui, if you can hear me, if I can come in here. Unfortunately, we don't have all day. I mean, this is an amazing breakthrough, definitely. But, I mean, tell us about this oxygenation. I mean, how is it different from the regular oxygen that we all breathe in? I mean, for a layperson like myself, wondering, oxygenation, what exactly does that mean? And how is this, I mean, number one, is it a treatment or a cure? And how is it different from gene therapy and, of course, bone marrow transplant?
Okay, first of all, as you were talking to me, you're breathing in oxygen, okay? And what is air? Air is made of 21% oxygen, nitrogen of 78%, and 1% rare gases. That was a major discovery by itself. But when you're using an oxygen concentrator, which is a machine that is almost like a mini oxygen plant, it takes in air, removes nitrogen, produces oxygen. When you're using a nasal cannula at 1 liter per minute, instead of 21% oxygen, you are inhaling 24% oxygen. At 2% liters per minute, you are inhaling 28%. So just a little bit. And this oxygen is no different from the oxygen you get in the hospital. The only difference is that by the time the patients get to the hospital, the reversible sickling has progressed to irreversible sickling with cell damage, and the oxygen no longer works. And that is why sickle cell disease confounded modern medicine for more than 100 years, because doctors in the hospital said, my goodness, the oxygen is not working. But you had to go back to 100 years of science to understand that. in the initial 30 minutes, which we found based on our clinical experience over the last 20 years at the Elephant Clinic, it's reversible. So you provide oxygen by an oxygen cylinder, an oxygen concentrator, and you can stop the crisis. And we've had so many case reports since I announced my discovery on July 4, 2024. I stated, let oxygen be your medicine. So we have up to 100 patients now on oxygen cylinders, oxygen concentrators. You can go on our website, sicklecelldiscovery.com, and you can see all the testimonies. People are saying this is a miracle.
Fantastic.
This is awesome.
Fantastic. You call the first reversible half hour golden half hour. But let me ask you, Nigeria has the largest sickle cell burden globally. Do you think this is something we can mainstream here? And I mean, what will be your call today as the country joins the world to observe this day?
Yes, I can tell you, there was a study which showed that in 2016, the United States spent $811 million treating sickle cell painful crisis complications in the hospital. You can imagine dropping that by 90%. So the same thing, there's an economic impact here of changing the paradigm. So what I've come to do is to disrupt the paradigm from people waiting to get into a sickle cell crisis and going into the hospital and being there for days, getting blood transfusions, getting complications, acute chest syndrome, avascular necrosis, all the terrible complications of sickle cell that arise from the crisis.